They didn't leave monuments. No written words. Just bone, ash, silence. But once they ruled. And then they disappeared. Every last one. Imagine this. A dense jungle. Not in the Amazon, but Antarctica. Yes, Antarctica. 50 million years ago. Warm, wet, alive. Now zoom forward. Humans walk the earth. But not just us. There were others. Short, long-armed tree climbers. Cold-adapted mammoth hunters with eyes like ice. Island hobbits were no taller than a 7-year-old. A people so mysterious we've never seen their full skeleton, just a pinky bone. We call them Denisovans. We call them Neanderthals. Floresiensis, Naledi, Luzonensis. Names stitched together by science. But who were they really? And where did they go? Here's what school never taught you. We were never the only humans. For most of history, we shared this planet. Sometimes we loved them. Sometimes we killed them. Other times we just arrived. And they vanished. Not with war. Not with fire. But with silence. A disappearance so total, it echoes louder than a scream. They carved tools. They buried their dead. They whispered to each other under cold moons. Their children laughed. Their hunters bled. Their mothers mourned. And yet, the earth swallowed them whole. Why? What makes us the last ones standing? What did we have? Or what did they lack? It wasn't just survival of the smartest. Some had bigger brains than us. Some built tools we're only now learning to replicate. One species even practiced ritual burial with a brain smaller than a chimpanzee's. Let that sink in. Fire, faith, burial. From a mind science said wasn't capable. So maybe we've been asking the wrong questions all along. This isn't just a story about extinction. It's a story of us. Because their blood runs in your veins. Their secrets sleep in your DNA. So follow their footprints, back through fire, ice, and shadow. To meet the very first one who dared to be human. It didn't start with words, not with cities, not even with fire. It started with a stone, one cracked rock, held in trembling hands, sharpened by instinct, used to change the world. We call him Homo habilis. But forget the Latin. Call him what he was, the handyman. The first creature who dared to shape his surroundings, not just survive them. 2 million years ago, somewhere in East Africa, he crouched beside a carcass. The smell of death is thick in the air. Vultures circling. His people are starving. And then a strike. Stone against stone. A spark of genius. A tool. He carves meat from bone. This wasn't survival. This was the intention. A conscious act. A decision to mold the world, not be molded by it. For the first time, something on Earth didn't just follow nature. It challenged it. Other animals ran faster, hunted better, saw in the dark. But this was different. This was mind over muscle. The beginning of invention. That tiny stone tool lit a fuse that would never burn out. From stone to fire. From fire to empires. But here's the twist. Homo habilis wasn't alone. At the same time, there were others. Parallel experiments in humanity. Some with bigger brains. Some who climbed trees better. Some who vanished before they ever left a mark. So why do we start the story with him? Because he changed something. The moment that stone cracked, the universe shifted. And yet Homo habilis didn't last. He disappeared. Gone. His species died out. his children scattered into the genetic abyss. But the idea? The instinct to creato modifito build. That stayed. Today, you unlock phones. He unlocked the stone. You write code. He wrote his legacy in flesh and fire. You don't carry his name, but you carry his spark. Somewhere inside you, buried deep beneath Wi-Fi, metal, and skyscrapers. It is a whisper, a ghost memory of that first stone, that first cut, that first choice to say, "No, I will not be prey. I will shape this world." It began with a crackle, not the sound of speech, but fire. Fierce, wild, controlled by hands that no longer feared the dark. Homo erectus, the upright man. But names don't matter. He was more than posture. He was in momentum. Nearly 2 million years ago, he stood at the edge of Africa, a thin silhouette under a red sun, stone tools at his belt, embers in his satchel, and he stepped forward, into the unknown. He didn't just survive. He moved. Further than any human before him. Further than any human could have imagined. Asia, Europe, Indonesia, across deserts, through freezing forests, over roaring rivers. Wherever he walked, he brought two things: tools, fire. Not just to cook food, but to conquer fear, to own the night. Imagine him in a cold cave, rain outside, predators circling, and there he is, tending a fire, eyes reflecting flame, not just surviving, dreaming of tomorrow, of distant lands, of something more. He was the first global nomad, the first to turn Earth into a map, and he didn't go alone. Entire groups migrated. Whole clans walked for generations, moving not for conquest, but for curiosity, for hope that something better waited out there. But here's the twist. Homo erectus didn't just visit the world. He stayed. For nearly 2 million years. That's longer than any human species, even us. Think about that. Your phone won't last 2 years. Most empires barely hit 200. But he endured longer than pyramids, religions, languages, everything. So where is he now? Gone. No grave. No goodbye. Just a trail of fossils and the faint echo of fire. Did he die out? Did he evolve into something else? Science isn't sure. Some think he became us. Others think he faded slow over tens of thousands of years, until the fire went cold. But he left something behind. Movement. That itch in your bones. That whisper that says, go. That hunger for new skies, new lands, new chances. That's him. When you book a flight, chase a dream, or move to a new city, it's his ghost that walks with you. He didn't write history. He walked it, step by step, across continents, through ice and jungle and time itself. And now, buried deep beneath modern roads and airport terminals, his bones still whisper, "Don't stop. Keep going." The wind didn't whisper. It screamed. Snow clawed at the rocks. Ice cracked like thunder. And in the heart of it all, they endured. Not us. Not yet. But a different kind of human. The Neanderthals. Forget what you've heard. They weren't dumb. They weren't monsters. They weren't less. They were built for survival, and they mastered it. Stocky, muscle-bound, brains even bigger than ours. They stood face to face with mammoths and death, and didn't blink. They lived in Ice Age Europe, in lands so brutal they made bones snap like twigs. But Neanderthals thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. Before pyramids, before cave paintings, before Homo sapiens even existed. They were hunters, not with blind rage, but with strategy. Spears carved with precision. Ambushes are set with thought. They moved in tight-knit bands, raised their young, mourned their dead. Yes, mourned. We found graves, deliberate, peaceful, filled with flowers and offerings. That's not instinct, that's emotion. And art? They had that too. Cave markings, handprints, carvings, proof that something stirred inside them. A voice not just of survival, but of meaning. Now picture this. 40 years ago, somewhere in ancient Europe, a Neanderthal crouches by firelight. He paints with red ochre. He stares into the flame, not just to see, but to remember. A child is born nearby. A story is told. A world exists. Their world. But then, we arrive. Homo sapiens. Younger. Faster. More social. More ambitious. At first, we coexisted. We met them. Traded. Mated. Yes, mated. If you have European or Asian ancestry, you still carry their blood. 1 to 2% of your DNA, Neanderthal. But something changed. Something shifted. Because slowly, they vanished. No war. No massacre. Just silence. One winter, they're there. The next, gone. Why? No one knows for sure. Maybe we outnumbered them. Maybe we stole their hunting grounds. Maybe we simply arrived. And that was enough. Or maybe it was the cold, or disease, or time. But here's the truth that stings. They weren't inferior. They were just unlucky. The world changed, and we adapted faster. But don't mistake survival for superiority. Because in the caves, in the DNA, in the earth, they left behind more than bones. They left behind a message. We were here. We mattered. And maybe they still do. Because the next time your hands shake in the cold and your body pushes through pain, that's not just you. That's a Neanderthal's ghost, gritting its teeth and carrying on. And the ice hasn't stopped yet. Because deeper in the frost, another mystery is waiting. No face, no name, no warning, just a fragment. A single finger bone pulled from a cave in Siberia. And everything we thought we knew about human history shattered. It was 2010. Scientists were digging in a cold, dark place called Denisova Cave, hidden deep in the Altai Mountains. A place that had swallowed time whole. Bones, teeth, dust older than memory. They found the sliver of bone and ran the DNA. And then, boom, it wasn't Neanderthal. It wasn't Homo sapiens. It was something else. A new kind of human. We didn't name them after behavior or discovery. Not like Homo habilis or erectus. No, we named them after their tomb. The Denisovans. They left no art, no cities, no written language. But what they did leave, there was a genetic fingerprint that stretched across continents. If you're Melanesian, Aboriginal Australian, or Southeast Asian, there's a part of you that's not just ancient, it's Denisovan. Some people carry up to 5% of their DNA. That's not a whisper in your genome. That's a shout. And what's crazier? They weren't just lurking in Siberia. Fossils suggest they were spread far and wide. The Tibetan Plateau, rainforests of Southeast Asia, the highlands of Papua New Guinea. These weren't cave dwellers hiding in shadows. They were survivors adapted to some of the harshest places on Earth. In Tibet, scientists found a Denisovan jawbone at over 14.0 feet above sea level. Try breathing at that altitude. You'll feel your lungs fail. But Denisovans? They thrived. Their genes are the reason many Tibetans today can survive the thin mountain air. A gift from ghosts we never knew. But here's the eerie part. We still don't know what they looked like. No full skeleton, no skull, no definitive face to paint. Just guesses. Based on a few teeth, a jaw, and scattered fragments of bone, it's like trying to rebuild a planet from a pebble. So, who were they? Were they gentle or fierce? Creative or cold? Did they sing? Did they dance? Did they fear the dark? Did they love? We don't know. And that mystery cuts deep. Because they were human, and we barely even knew they existed. One of their molars was so massive. At first, scientists thought it came from a bear, but it didn't. It came from a cousin. A being that once stood where you stand now. Then, like a breath, gone. No war. No fossilized battlefield. Just extinction, quiet and slow. And we, again, were the ones left standing. But maybe not alone. Because inside your body, inside your blood, a Denisovan heartbeat still echoes. And the cave they emerged from? Still dark, still deep, still whispering secrets we haven't heard yet. And as we move forward, the question sharpens. How many more ghosts walk with us? Imagine this. You're deep in the jungle of Indonesia, on a remote island called Flores. The heat is thick, the trees are watching, and in the heart of a limestone cave, your flashlight catches something impossible. A tiny skeleton, barely over 3 feet tall. The skull, no bigger than a grapefruit. At first, scientists thought it was a child, or maybe a diseased modern human. But then came the truth. This wasn't us. This was Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit. No, not Tolkien's fiction. This was real. And it shattered everything. Because this little humanthus ancient mystery was different. Not just in size, but in the timeline. The Hobbit wasn't from 2 million years ago like some of our earliest ancestors. She may have lived just 50 years ago. That's recent. While we Homo sapiens were already spreading across the globe, and while Neanderthals were still clinging to Ice Age Europe, a completely different species of human was thriving in isolation on a tropical island. Let that sink in. We were never alone. And for thousands of years, we shared the planet with another kind of human, barely over 3 feet tall. But don't let the size fool you. Homo floresiensis wasn't a primitive leftover. She made stone tools, hunted pygmy elephants, may have used fire, and likely had her own language. This wasn't some slow-minded creature. This was a tiny, intelligent survivor. A product of what evolution does best: adapt or vanish. Flores Island is isolated, cut off from the mainland by deep ocean trenches. Getting there wasn't a mistake. It took boats, or rafts, or pure accidental courage. And once there, a strange kind of evolution took over. Scientists call it island dwarfism. Limited resources, no large predators. Over time, even elephants shrink. And so did humans. But the big question remains: what happened to them? Some say rising seas cut them off, turned the island into a trap. Others believe modern humans arrived, and that was the end. Whether through violence, disease, or simply out-competition, Homo floresiensis vanished. But here's the part that chills the spine. Some locals still tell stories of small people living deep in the jungle, hairy, elusive, quick. They call them Abu Gogo, and they insist. They never truly disappeared. Science hasn't proven it, but science also once believed there were only two kinds of humans, Neanderthals and us. Now, we've uncovered over a dozen, and every discovery says the same thing. We were never the only ones. The Hobbit people were a curveball in evolution's playbook, proof that intelligence wears many faces, and just maybe, the islands still whisper their names. It starts with a crawl. A team of scientists is descending into a pitch-black cave system in South Africa. Narrow tunnels, jagged rock, barely enough space to breathe. This was no ordinary dig. This was a descent into the impossible, because what they found down there didn't just rewrite textbooks. It defied logic. Scattered bones, dozens of individuals, curved fingers, ape-like shoulders, a skull so small it looked ancient. Homo naledi, another lost human. But this one wasn't supposed to exist. Here's why. At first glance, Naledi looked like a relic from 2 million years ago. Tiny brain, primitive features, a body trapped between two world-smart ape, part human. Scientists were sure it was ancient. But then came the carbon dating. Not 2 million years old. 250Ling. Let that hit. This small-brained hominin lived at the same time as early Homo sapiens. While we were painting cave walls, crafting bone tools, and singing to gods, Naledi was deep underground burying their dead. Yeah, you heard that right. Their bones weren't randomly scattered. They were placed, carefully, repeatedly, again and again. They returned to that impossible cave to lay their dead to rest. In the dark, no sunlight, no easy path. A journey that required intention. But how? How could a species with a brain smaller than an orange grasp death? Understand mourning? And more importantly, why did they do it? What did they believe waited on the other side? We used to think burial was proof of higher thinking. Only we did that. Or maybe the Neanderthals. But Naledi, they force us to ask, is intelligence only about brain size? Or is it something deeper? And the mystery just keeps twisting. Because the cave-rising star wasn't easy to access. It wasn't a place you'd stumble into. Some passages were just 7 inches wide. This wasn't a random death pit. It was sacred, deliberate, almost ritualistic. That's what makes Homo naledi one of the most haunting discoveries in human history. Not because they were like us, but because they shouldn't have been. They don't fit. They don't belong in our neat, linear story of human evolution. But they're there, staring back at us from the dark. What if they had myths? What if they believed in spirits? What if they feared the dark like we do? Or sang songs before sealing the cave behind them? We'll never know. But maybe, just maybe, they were more human than we think. It was just a cave. Remote, lush, tucked deep in the rainforests of Luzon, the Philippines. Locals had known about it for years, Calao Cave. But in 2007, a strange bone turned up. A foot bone. Small, human-like, but not quite. It was the start of a mystery no one saw coming. At first, scientists thought it might belong to Homo sapiens, or maybe a child. But as they kept digging, the puzzle deepened. Teeth, toes, fingers. Each one tells a different story. Some looked modern, others ancient, almost primitive. Then came the truth bomb. This wasn't just another early human. It was a new species. Meet Homo luzonensis. Tiny, lightweight, maybe just over 4 feet tall, a mix of traits that shouldn't exist together. Some bones resembled early Homo erectus. Others echoed the even older Australopithecus, famed Lucy. Yet this species lived as recently as 50 years ago. That's the same time Neanderthals were vanishing in Europe, and Homo sapiens were spreading across Asia. So how was this possible? Imagine it, an isolated island, cut off from the rest of the world for hundreds of thousands of years. No mammoths, no saber-tooths, just dense forest, giant rats, and crocodiles. And hidden somewhere in that green maze, a tribe of forgotten humans. They likely descended from early Homo erectus explorers who reached the island long before modern humans ever arrived. Then time did its work. Isolation, evolution, miniaturization. The same thing happened to animals on islands like pygmy elephants. And it happened to humans too. This isn't the first time we've seen this. Remember Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species from another Indonesian island? Also tiny, also strange, also vanished. What is it about these islands? Why do they breed such mysterious variations of humanity? And here's the twist. Homo luzonensis didn't live in the deep past. They lived side by side with us. They walked the forests while Homo sapiens were drawing on cave walls. Another human species. Breathing, hunting, living, then gone. No one knows what happened. Did we ever meet? Did they see us as gods? Or enemies? Or did we never cross paths at all, just ships in the night of deep time? No tools have been found. No fire pits. No art. Just bones. And questions. Questions that slice through the illusion that we were ever alone. Because if Luzonensis lived just 50 years ago, what else is out there? Still buried. Still waiting. Still whispering from the roots of the jungle. We were here. Before fire. Before language. Before gods, myths, and war. There was a stone. Rough, sharp, held by trembling fingers. And in that moment, everything changed. 2.5 million years ago, Africa wasn't quiet. Predators stalked the savanna. Mammoths thundered across dry plains. Life was brutal, short, ruthless. But in the shadows of these beasts, something new stirred. Something small, clever, and hungry for more than survival. Enter Homo habilis, the handyman, the first human who looked at nature and thought, I can shape this. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but dangerous in a way no beast could match. He picked up stones not to throw, but to carve, to strike, to turn bone and sinew into sustenance. Habilis didn't just find food, he unlocked it. Bone marrow, tough hides, skulls cracked open like ancient safes, releasing calories no other creature dared to access. And that changed everything. We call them tools. But really, they were weapons against extinction. Each flake of stone, a declaration. I will not go quietly. And so began the arms race of the mind. But let's not pretend Homo habilis was fully human. He was short, just over 4 feet tall. Long arms, ape-like. A brain barely half the size of yours. He didn't speak. Not really. No names, no songs. Just grunts, gestures, survival. But inside that modest skull, a fire was smoldering. The kind that doesn't burn wood. It burns through time. Imagine him crouched at a kill site, scavenging behind lions. Eyes darting, hands quick. Stone scrapes against bone. A sliver chips off sharp as glass. He grins. This isn't luck, it's a strategy. The dawn of foresight, planning, intent. He wasn't reacting to the world anymore. He was changing it. And then he vanished. Homo habilis walked the earth for over 500 years longer than our own species has existed. Then, like so many others, he disappeared. No grand ending. No epic tragedy. Just gone. Replaced. Outcompeted. Forgotten. Except he wasn't. Because his legacy didn't die with him. Every hammer, every wheel, every rocket starts with him. That stone tool? It was the first keyboard, the first brushstroke, the first rebellion. He reached forward through time, and we're still holding what he made. So next time you hold something in your hands, a phone, a pen, a blade, know this: the ghost of Homo habilis is holding it, too. It began with a flicker, a spark, a glow, then a blaze that lit the dark corners of the world. Long before Homo sapiens mastered flame, Homo erectus made it his ally. And that changed everything. He wasn't like habilis, fragile and hunched. He stood tall, lean, strong, a true runner, built for endurance, not bursts of power. And he ran far. Africa, the Middle East, India, China, Indonesia. He was the first human to leave home. No maps, no language. Just fire in his belly and endless horizons in his eyes. He crossed rivers with no names, marched across unknown plains, and stared at sunsets no human had ever seen. But what made him unstoppable? Not just legs, not just tools, fire. Homo erectus didn't just find it. He learned to keep it, tending it like a sacred god, protecting it through the storm and night. Because fire was more than warmth. It was a weapon, a cook, a guard dog. It scared off predators, softened food, extended the day. And with that extra light came something else. Time. Time to plan, to teach, to sit and wonder what's beyond that ridge. But don't mistake him for some primitive caveman. Homo erectus built shelters, crafted advanced tools, and stayed alive in places modern humans still struggle to survive. He wasn't guessing his way through life. He was engineering it. A mind sharper than obsidian. And Yeth didn't disappear quickly. He lasted 1.8 million years. Let that sink in. Homo sapiens? We've been around for a fraction of that. Erectus walked this earth longer than any of us. Longer than any species of human ever has. That's not a footnote. That's a reign. But like all great empires, it ended. Not in fire, not in glory, just faded. No one knows exactly how. Climate shift? Competition? Maybe his own descendants evolved and left him behind. But here's the twist. He may be gone, but his fire never went out. Because it burns in every campfire, every stove, every invention sparked in the human mind. When you look at a glowing screen in the dark, you're staring into his legacy. Homo erectus didn't just walk out of Africa. He ignited the human journey. So next time you're chasing a dream, starting something terrifying, stepping into the unknown, remember the first one who ever did. The flame bearer, the pathfinder, the wanderer. Want to keep walking deeper into this lost world? Then hit that subscribe. Turn on the bell. They weren't grunting, hunched beasts. They weren't cartoon cavemen. They were giants of ice and bone. And for a while, they ruled Europe. Neanderthals, built like tanks. Short, powerful frames. Thick skulls. Massive noses. Brains bigger than ours. Yes, bigger. They weren't dumb. They were survivors. They hunted mammoths in blizzards, slept beneath frozen cliffs, and endured cold that would kill most of us in hours. Every breath they took, razor-edged. Every step, a fight against extinction. But they didn't just survive. They lived. They crafted tools as sharp as sharks' teeth, used fire, wore clothes, and left behind something shocking: burials. That's right. They buried their dead. Carefully, intentionally, sometimes with flowers. That's not instinct. That's grief. That's the flicker of spirituality. They also made art. Pigments, shell jewelry, hand stencils in deep caves, messages in stone, meant to last forever. Whispers from 60 years ago that say, "We were here, we felt things." But then came a shadow. Us. Homo sapiens swept into Europe like a tide. Strangers with strange faces, strange tools, strange tongues. We met them, and everything changed. We fought. We bred. We absorbed them. Yes, they're in you. If you're of European or Asian descent, you carry their blood. 1 to 2% of your DNA, Neanderthal. That nose, that bone density, that immune system boost, it's not just yours, it's theirs. But their bodies stopped appearing. The burials ceased. The cave paintings ended. 40 years ago, they vanished. No epic war, no volcanic apocalypse, just silence. One day, they were there, then gone. So what happened? Was it climate change? Competition for food? Or were we the storm they couldn't stop? Some scientists say we outthought them. Others say we outloved them more. Social networks are tighter, our groups larger. Or maybe we outlasted them. By chance. By timing. But here's the gut punch. We didn't just survive them. We forgot them. Until bones whispered back. Until genes revealed the truth. They're still here. In your cells. In your instincts. In the way you stare into the cold and feel something ancient stir. Neanderthals weren't a dead end. They were a chapter, and not a small one. Their resilience shaped your own. Their tools became your tools. Their fire still warms your blood. So next time you feel alone in the dark, remember someone stood there before you. In the snow, with a spear, and a fire that would not die. We never saw their faces. No full skeleton. No cave murals. Not even a name they gave themselves. Just a finger bone. And a tooth. That's all we had. From a cave buried in the Siberian mountains, Denisova Cave. Discovered in 2010. Tiny fragments. Forgotten by time. But loaded with secrets. When scientists tested the DNA, their jaws dropped. This wasn't Neanderthal. It wasn't us. It was something else. A new species. A ghost branch on the human family tree. They called them Denisovans. Who were they? We still don't fully know. They left almost nothing behind. No villages. No tools. Just a whisper in the bones. But DNA? It screamed. Denisovans had power. Their genes show up today in modern humans. But not everywhere. Only in specific places. Melanesians, Aboriginal Australians, Tibetans. Why? Because Denisovans spread quietly, widely. They lived across Asia, from the Siberian cold to the peaks of the Himalayas. They adapted to high altitudes long before anyone else. And when Homo sapiens moved in, they met, they mixed. And that's why some of us, carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. Think about that. People with no face, no art, no name, and yet they're inside you. Inside the lungs that breathe mountain air. Inside immune systems sharpened by ancient survival. Inside traits we don't fully understand. But here's the haunting part. They vanished. Like smoke. No epic decline. No mass extinction. Just a genetic echo. A trace in our blood. Did we replace them? Or merge with them? Were they hunted? Wiped out by climate? Did their last torch flicker out in some icy cave while we pushed forward? The truth is still buried. Somewhere in Asia. In caves we haven't found yet. In bones still waiting to be touched by light. The Denisovans challenge our story. They weren't rare mistakes. They were humans just like us. Complex, capable, connected. And we're only beginning to understand how deep that connection goes. Their existence rewrote the textbooks, flipped the script, taught us one chilling truth. There were more of us than we ever imagined. More humans, more possibilities, more paths not taken. You don't need a skull to see a face. You just need a fragment, a whisper of DNA, and suddenly the shadows move. They are not gone. They are not forgotten. They are you. Imagine stumbling on a skeleton the size of a child. But it's not a child. Not even close. It's an adult. Tiny. Barely over 3 feet tall. With a skull the size of a grapefruit. Now pause. This wasn't from millions of years ago. Not from some ancient monkey ancestor. This was from just 50 years back. Right around the time Neanderthals still hunted in Europe. And Homo sapiens were spreading like wildfire. Yet here, on a remote Indonesian island called Flores, lived something else. Homo floresiensis. The media called her the Hobbit. And for once, the hype was real. She walked upright. She hunted. She used stone tools. She probably used fire. And she lived among giant lizards and pygmy elephants. Read that again, pygmy elephants. This island was straight out of a fantasy novel. But here's the question that rattled the entire scientific world. How did they survive this long? Tiny brains, small bodies, cut off from the world. Yet they endured, while far more advanced species vanished. One theory? Island dwarfism. A phenomenon where species shrink over generations when stuck on small islands. Less food, less space, smaller everything. But Homo floresiensis wasn't just shrunken down Homo sapiens. Nope. Their skull shape, wrist bones, and jaw structure said otherwise. They were their own species, a totally unique branch of the human tree. And here's the real kicker. Some locals in Flores still whisper legends of little people living deep in the jungle. Small, hairy, barefoot, shy, but smart. One tribe calls them the Ebu Gogo. They say they stole food, mimicked speech, and lived in caves. Folklore, or fragments of memory? Could Homo floresiensis have survived longer than we thought? Could they have lived side by side with early humans? Maybe they still did, long after the bones suggest they vanished. It makes you wonder, how many other islands held secrets like this? How many other tiny branches were clipped before we could find them? What else have we missed? Homo floresiensis isn't just a weird footnote. She's proof that evolution doesn't play by the rules. That advanced doesn't always mean better. And that isolation can produce something completely unexpected. They lived. They thrived. And then they disappeared. Or did they? The island is silent now. The caves whisper nothing. But the bones? They shout a question we haven't answered yet. How many kinds of humans were there? Now picture this. You're crawling through a narrow, pitch-black tunnel, barely wide enough for your chest. No light, no sound, just the weight of Earth pressing in from all sides. Then suddenly, a chamber opens, and inside, skeletons, dozens. Not scattered, not dumped, but placed deliberately. Rising Star Cave System, South Africa. A discovery that rattled the world. Not because the bones were ancient, but because they weren't. Meet Homo naledi. Shoulders like an ape. Long, curved fingers. Tiny brain roughly the size of an orange. By all evolutionary logic, they should have vanished millions of years ago. But they didn't. These bones were just 250 years old. That's the same time early Homo sapiens were already painting cave walls and shaping bone tools. So how in the world was this ancient-looking creature still alive? And here's the chilling part. They buried their dead. Let that sink in. A species with a brain barely big enough to comprehend fire crawled deep into a labyrinth of stone, again and again, to leave their fallen behind. This wasn't survival. This was a ritual. But that's impossible, right? We used to think symbolic thought was exclusive to us, that only Homo sapiens, and maybe Neanderthals, understood death, memory, and mourning. And yet, here were these small-brained hominins doing something deeply human, deliberate, repetitive, emotional, which raises the most unsettling question of all. What if intelligence isn't about brain size? What if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if evolution isn't a straight march from primitive to advanced, but a maze of forgotten experiments? And Homo naledi? A reminder that consciousness doesn't come in just one shape. We don't even know how they got into that chamber. The entrance is so tight and dangerous, it took expert climbers with special gear to reach it. So how did they do it? No tools, no ropes, no torches. Were they stronger than we thought? Did they carry fire into the dark? Or was this something else entirely? A ritual path? A sacred passage? Even their face flattened, with human-like teeth whispers contradictions. Half human, half something else. Homo naledi forces us to confront a brutal truth. Maybe we're not so unique. Maybe the human spark isn't exclusive. Maybe others had it, too just in a form we failed to understand. One small brain, one massive mystery. They lived in the shadows. And maybe that's why we missed them for so long. But now they're speaking, and they're not done yet. It starts with teeth. Tiny, oddly shaped, unlike anything seen before. Callao Cave, northern Luzon, Philippines. Archaeologists dig, expecting to find traces of modern humans. Instead, they unearth a whisper from the unknown Homo luzonensis. No full skull, no intact skeleton, just fragments, teeth, foot bones, hand bones, a femur. But it's enough. Enough to know this wasn't just a variation of us. This was a different kind of human. Small, lightweight, feet curved for climbing, not walking upright. And here's the kicker. These remains are at least 50 years old. That's the same time Neanderthals were dying out, Denisovans were fading, and Homo sapiens were exploding across the globe. Yet here, on this isolated island, a different cousin quietly lived, breathed, and vanished. How did they get here? Luzon has always been an island. No land bridges, no easy paths. You couldn't walk here. You had to cross the sea. But Homo luzonensis wasn't supposed to be able to do that. Their brains were too small. Their tools, if they had any, are long gone. Yet somehow, they made the voyage. Imagine it. A primitive raft. A few daring explorers, setting off into the ocean with no maps, no guarantee. But they did it. They arrived. And they stayed. They weren't alone either. Bones of rhinoceros, deer, man-monitor lizards scattered across the cave. These people hunted big game. Not with firearms, not with advanced tech, but with whatever they had: sticks, stones, strategy. And they didn't just survive. They adapted. Over generations, their bodies changed. Their size shrank. Their limbs morphed for climbing in dense jungle. Evolution sculpted them to fit the island. They became something new. And yet, just like the hobbits of Flores, they disappeared. No signs of war, no fire, no massacre, just gone. So what happened? Did rising seas trap them until resources ran dry? Did Homo sapiens arrive and push them out, intentionally or not? Or did their own isolation seal their fate? It's easy to forget these were humans, not just bones. They felt fear. They looked up at the stars. They held each other when a storm rolled in. And now all that's left are a few teeth, some scattered bones, and a question that won't stop echoing. How many other human species walked this earth that we've never found? Every cave, every island, every jungle might still be hiding a secret. And every time we think we know our story, someone like Homo luzonensis shows up and rewrites the script. And the deeper you look, the more you realize evolution didn't handpick us. We just happen to be the ones left standing. Look close enough, and you'll see it. A rhythm, a pulse, like a drumbeat buried beneath the fossil dust. Every human species before us followed the same arc. They rose, they thrived, then they vanished. Again, and again, and again. Homo habilis sparked innovation. Gone. Homo erectus conquered continents. Gone. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Floresiensis, Luzonensis, all extinct. Some lasted longer than us. Some were smarter in ways we don't fully understand. Some adapted to jungles, others to ice, others to altitude. They weren't failures. They were survivors until they weren't. So the real question isn't why they disappeared. It's this: why do they all vanish right after we appear? It's a disturbing pattern. And it doesn't feel like a coincidence. Let's rewind 300 years. Homo sapiens emerges in Africa. At first, we're just another cousin in a crowded family tree. But wherever we go, the branches start snapping. Not immediately, not violently, but inevitably. Neanderthals held out in Europe for thousands of years until we arrived. Denisovans ruled the highlands until we showed up. The hobbits of Flores gone shortly after we reached Southeast Asia. Every encounter ends the same way. They vanish. We expand. Is it aggression? Did we wipe them out in tribal wars, clubbing them to extinction? Or maybe it was indirect. We out-hunted them, outbred them, stole their food, their land, their future. Or maybe we became them, interbred, absorbed their DNA, until there was nothing left but fragments in our genome, like ancient echoes trapped in bone. But here's the twist. This isn't just a tale of the past. It's a mirror held up to our future. Because the pattern, the rise, thrive, vanish cycle, it doesn't stop with them. We're in it too. We rose. We're thriving. But no one said we're immune to the last act. Our ancestors vanished because they couldn't adapt fast enough. But we've become the most adaptable force Earth has ever seen. And that might be the danger. We don't wait for change. We cause it. Climate, ecosystems, genetic code. We're rewriting everything at breakneck speed. But if the past whispers one thing, it's this: nature always cashes its checks. We like to think we're the exception, but evolution doesn't play favorites. It doesn't crown champions. It just watches. And when a species pushes too far, too fast, it resets the board. It wasn't bigger muscles. It wasn't sharper claws. It wasn't even fire. It was the brain, that squishy electric storm behind our eyes. That's what tipped the scales. But what if it's also what cursed us? Rewind 200 years. Neanderthals had larger brains than us. Fact. But size wasn't the secret. It was how we used it. We dreamed. We imagined. We lied. That's the dangerous part. Homo sapiens didn't just survive, we manipulated reality. We turned red ochre on a cave wall into a story. We pointed at the stars and gave them names. We whispered about spirits, gods, and monsters that didn't exist. And somehow, that made us stronger. Why? Because we were the first species to live in two worlds. The world that is, and the world that could be. That gave us planning. It gave us empathy. It gave us the ability to unify around invisible ideas. Tribes, flags, religions, revenge, love. Ideas built civilizations. Ideas also start wars. No other human species showed this level of cognitive abstraction. No mythologies. No complex symbols. No organized burial sites with ritual meaning. Until we showed up. That leap, it changed everything. We weren't just reacting to nature anymore. We were rewriting it. But here's the glitch. The same brain that imagined paradise could also imagine hell. The same brain that told stories to unite us could invent lies to divide us. Fear, paranoia, us versus them. Those aren't bugs. They're features of the Sapien OS. So maybe Neanderthals didn't vanish because they were dumb. Maybe Denisovans didn't fail. Maybe Homo naledi wasn't a mistake. Maybe we were just too dangerous. Not physically, psychologically. We were unpredictable. We were erratic. We'd do anything to win, even if it meant the world burned. It's a paradox. Our intelligence made us unstoppable. Our imagination made us gods. But those same tools, they're double-edged blades. Because when a species invents nukes, AI, and social media disinformation, before it learns how to manage its emotions, extinction becomes an inside job. So let's ask the haunting question. What if the thing that made us human, this is also what makes us terminal? Deep in the pitch-black tunnels of South Africa's Rising Star Cave, archaeologists found bones. Dozens of them. But these weren't just old. They were out of place. Too primitive for their age. Too human for their form. Meet Homo naledi, a species that shouldn't exist, but did. Small brains, curved fingers, sloped skulls like something out of prehistory. If you looked at Naledi, you'd think, this is 2 million years ago. But it wasn't that old. Just 250 years. Which means Naledi lived at the same time as early Homo sapiens. Let that sink in. While we were painting caves, they were crawling through them, in total darkness. And here's where it gets weird. They didn't just die in those caves. They were put there, on purpose, over and over again, buried. A species with a brain no larger than an orange might have been performing funerals, not by accident, not from falling, deliberate placement. That should not be possible. Our brains are 3 times the size. We tell ourselves we're the only ones who understand death. But what if they did too? What if this so-called primitive species had rituals, beliefs, grief? Naledi breaks every rule, every timeline, every assumption. They used tools screwed, yes, but purposeful. They lit fires deep in underground chambers. They navigated a pitch-black maze with 0 natural light. And no, they weren't dragged there by predators. There are no bite marks, no broken escape limbs, just intentional, peaceful placements. They treated their dead with care. And for a moment, they stood toe-to-toe with us. That's terrifying. Because if they were capable of this, what else have we missed? How many stories did we write off as too stupid to be real? Homo naledi whispers a warning from the shadows. Your definition of intelligence is too narrow. Your view of humanity is too proud. You're not the first to mourn. You're not the only ones who cared. And here's the twist. Homo naledi vanished. No trace of a grand extinction. No signs of war, just silence. Like they slipped back into the dark. And maybe, just maybe, they chose to. They weren't trying to conquer the world. They weren't racing toward progress. They were living, remembering, honoring their dead. Quietly, deliberately. No cities, no ruins. Just the mark of empathy, carved in stone and bone. Maybe humanity isn't just fire and invention. Maybe it's also this, laying someone to rest, even when no one else will remember. Picture this, a dense jungle, thick with fog. Chirping birds echo through the treetops. And in the undergrowth, something moves. But it's not a monkey, not an ape, and definitely not human, at least, not in the way you think. In 2003, on the remote Indonesian island of Flores, scientists uncovered a skeleton. Small, childlike, barely over 3 feet tall. They thought it was a modern human with a disease, a mutation, a fluke. But it wasn't. It was a new species, one that no one had ever seen before. They called her Homo floresiensis. But the world named her something far more fitting, the Hobbit. She had a brain the size of a grapefruit, hands too big for her arms, a skull like something out of deep prehistory. And yet, she walked upright, used tools, hunted pygmy elephants, possibly even controlled fire. She lived not millions of years ago, but maybe just 0 years back. Let's put that in perspective. While Neanderthals were surviving Ice Age Europe, and Homo sapiens were spreading across continents, a different kind of human was thriving in total isolation. What makes Flores so strange? It's an island, cut off, untouched by time. And on that island, evolution played a different game. This wasn't just survival of the fittest. It was survival of the smallest. This phenomenon is real. It's called island dwarfism, where species shrink over generations to adapt to limited resources. So yes, elephants became pygmies. Dragons became lizards. And humans? They became hobbits. But here's where the mystery sharpens. Why did they vanish? No bones of war. No climate disaster. Just disappearance. Did rising seas trap and doom them? Did Homo sapiens arrive and push them out? Or did they simply fade into the forest? Unseen, unknown, untouched, even stranger. Some locals still tell stories. of little people who steal food, who live in the hills, who vanish if you chase them. Are these myths or echoes? Could descendants of Floresiensis have lingered longer than we think? We'll likely never know. Because what we found, just one skull, one partial skeleton. It's all that's left. Everything else, swallowed by jungle, time, and silence. But here's the truth that cuts through. Homo floresiensis wasn't a fluke. She was a reminder that humanity isn't one form. It's many. It adapts. It bends. It survives, even in the strangest places, under the harshest odds. And maybe, just maybe, the world is still hiding others like her. In deep caves, dense forests, uncharted lands, waiting, watching, forgotten. High up in the wind-bitten cliffs of Siberia, in a cave cold enough to preserve time itself, scientists found a fragment. Not a skull, not a skeleton, just a sliver of bone, a whisper of someone long gone. It was 2010. The world barely noticed. But history? It cracked wide open. That bone didn't belong to a Neanderthal or a modern human. It belonged to something else entirely. A new species, undiscovered, unwritten, unknown. They called them Denisovans, named after the Denisova cave in Siberia, where silence had kept their secret for tens of thousands of years. Here's the catch. We've never found a complete Denisovan skeleton. Just teeth, a pinky bone, a bit of a jaw, but somehow they've left a trail behind. Not in tools, not in cave paintings, but in something far more personal. Our DNA. Today, if you're from Melanesia, Aboriginal Australia, or parts of East and Southeast Asia, you might carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's not a myth. That's not a metaphor. That's a real living legacy in your blood. But here's where the mystery deepens. We don't really know who they were. No clear picture of their faces. No detailed map of their travels. Just puzzle pieces scattered across Asia. They may have walked the highlands of Tibet, adapted to thin air, survived in cold, oxygen-starved environments that would kill us in days. Their genes are why some modern humans can thrive at high altitudes. Imagine that. Breathing easier. Because of a ghost ancestor you never knew existed. And if Homo sapiens met the Denisovans, and we did, we didn't just fight or replace them. We mated with them. We absorbed them. So when we say they're gone, that's not entirely true. They're in us. But why did they vanish? No one knows. Was it competition? Climate change? Disease? Or did they simply blend into us so completely that their bodies disappeared, but their essence never left? They're one of the most haunting mysteries in the human story. Not because they were loud, but because they were silent. A species that moved through shadow, left no monuments, and yet shaped entire civilizations from behind the veil of time. The Denisovans remind us that we didn't evolve alone, and we didn't survive alone. We're hybrids. Curious how ancient grains shaped empires and your breakfast? Hit that subscribe button and join the journey through forgotten fields and lost knowledge. History isn't dead. It's planted, and it's growing. Mosaics, built from forgotten kisses in ancient night. Love where this is going? Subscribe to the channel, hit that, and drop a comment. What's hiding in your DNA? The story's just getting deeper. Let's keep digging. Deep beneath South Africa's surface, past winding tunnels and jagged rocks. In a cave system so tight, most adults can't even fit A secret was hiding in the dark. Not gold, not jewels, but bones. Dozens of them, belonging to a species we weren't supposed to find. A species that shouldn't have existed when it did. Meet Homo naledi. Discovered in 2013, inside the Rising Star Cave system. This ancient human relative didn't just challenge everything we thought we knew. It laughed in the face of it. Because here's the mind twister. Naledi had a brain the size of an orange, 1/3 the size of ours. Their fingers were curved like tree climbers. Their shoulders more ape than man. On paper, they looked like they belonged 2 million years ago. Primitive, archaic, basic. But then came the twist. Carbon dating put them at just 250, 0 years old. At the same time, we were walking on the Earth. That's like finding a flip phone in an Apple store. Plugged in and still working. How could such a primitive species exist alongside Homo sapiens? And it gets weirder. Those bones? They weren't scattered like leftovers from a predator. They were placed deep in a chamber called the Dinaledi chamber. Repeatedly. Over the years. That suggests something mind-blowing. Homo naledi may have buried their dead. Let that sink in. A species with a brain smaller than yours at age 5 navigated a pitch-black death trap of a cave, again and again, to lay their people to rest. No torches, no maps, just memory and meaning. Burial isn't just disposal. It's a ritual. It's grief. It's consciousness of mortality. If Naledi really did this, then size didn't define intelligence. And consciousness wasn't ours alone. And here's where it punches you in the gut. No signs they used fire. No cave art. No jewelry. But maybe they didn't need those things to feel loss. To wonder. To remember. Maybe humanity starts not with invention, but with intention. We used to think evolution was a ladder. Each species is smarter than the last. But Naledi? They're a fork in the road. Proof that intelligence didn't climb straight up. It branched. It circled. It experimented. So, who were they? Silent mourners of the deep? The philosophers of prehistory? Or just another cousin we barely got to know? Before the lights went out, whatever the answer, they left us something no artifact ever could. A feeling, a presence in the dark. In 2003, on the remote Indonesian island of Flores, scientists stumbled into something that shouldn't have existed. A skeleton, tiny, just over a meter tall, with a skull no bigger than a grapefruit. At first, they thought it was a child, then maybe a diseased modern human. They were wrong. This was something else. Something new. Something old. Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit. She wasn't a joke. She wasn't deformed. She was her own branch on the human tree. A tiny human with a full-grown legacy. Tool user. Fire starter. Hunter of pygmy elephants. Living proof that evolution doesn't just make things bigger and better. Sometimes, it makes them smaller, smarter, and sneakier. Now here's where things get eerie. Homo floresiensis may have lived as recently as 50 years ago, which means, while Neanderthals were building shelters in frozen Europe, while Homo sapiens were crossing continents, the Hobbit was thriving in isolation on a jungle-cloaked island. Separate, unknown, unbothered. But then, she vanished, just like the others. No war. No signs of disease. No mass extinction event. Just gone. Did rising sea levels strand her tribe, cutting them off from food? Did Homo sapiens arrive and unknowingly outcompete them? Or is it possible that some still lived on, hidden in the jungle for thousands more years. Because here's the wild part. The local people of Flores, the Nage, has a legend. A small, hairy humanoid called the Ebu Gogo. They say the Ebu Gogo stole food, mimicked speech, lived in caves, and walked upright. And they say they were real. Could the Hobbit and the Ebu Gogo be one and the same? Could a species of human live in hiding that long, unseen by the modern world? Unlikely? Sure. Impossible? Never. Especially when bones tell a different story than textbooks do. The discovery of Homo floresiensis flipped everything we knew about evolution on its head. We used to think that humans with smaller brains were less advanced. That isolation meant weakness. That evolution was a march toward modernity. But the Hobbit reminded us, nature isn't linear, it's experimental. Sometimes the smallest species pack the biggest surprises. Think about it. A tiny human, forgotten for millennia, found in a jungle cave on a volcanic island. It sounds like a fairy tale, but it's real. She's real, and she changes the story. What if there are more of them out there? More cousins lost to time. More whispers in the jungle. Evolution didn't leave a blueprint. It left a trail. And the Hobbit is one bright burning torch along the way. In 2010, deep inside a Siberian cave cloaked in eternal cold, a team of researchers discovered a pinky bone. Just a fragment. No skull. No face. No name. Yet what that tiny bone held inside would rewrite human history. The cave was called Denisova, and the creature it belonged to? Not Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens. Something else. We called them Denisovansa, name borrowed from a cave because we didn't know what else to call them. But these weren't shadows. They were real. And their DNA was loud. Here's the kicker. We've never found a full Denisovan skeleton. Just a finger bone, a few teeth, a jawbone from Tibet, and fragments scattered across Asia. Yet from these scraps alone, we know this. They were powerful. They were everywhere. And they left a legacy written inside of us. If you're Melanesian or Aboriginal Australian, up to 5% of your DNA is Denisovan. Their genes helped ancient humans survive high altitudes, bitter colds, and tough terrain. In fact, the gene that helps modern Tibetans breathe on Mount Everest came from a Denisovan. Yeah, that's not human grit. That's ghost power. But the mystery only grows deeper. How did they spread so far? From the mountains of Siberia to the jungles of Southeast Asia? How did a species we've barely touched leave such a massive genetic fingerprint? And why did they disappear? They lived at the same time as Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. In fact, they interbred with both. We weren't alone. We were sharing beds with ancient cousins whose faces we'll never see. There's even a jawbone in Tibet massive, thick and worn, likely Denisovan. Carbon dated to over 160 years ago, and it didn't come from a cave. It came from a monastery. This wasn't a forgotten cousin. This was a ghost population, walking with us across continents. Underground, unseen, but not unfelt. And get this. Some scientists believe there are even more undiscovered Denisovan variants out there. Hidden strands in our DNA that don't match Neanderthal or modern humans. It's like looking in a mirror and realizing the reflection isn't yours alone. So what happened to them? Did Homo sapiens outcompete them? Did climate change erase their strongholds? Or were they simply absorbed into us? Maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they became us, dissolving into our blood like ink in water. The Denisovans didn't need statues, cities, or cave art. They left something stronger: genes, built for mountains, forged for cold, etched into the very breath of those who still walk the highest places on Earth. In 2013, deep inside the Rising Star Cave in South Africa, explorers crawled through a narrow chute just 18 centimeters wide. Total darkness, underground silence. No light, no way back up without help. And yet, at the bottom of that abyss, they found a burial chamber, filled with over 1,500 bones, and not of animals, but of something eerily human. Enter Homo naledi, a species so strange, so out of place. Scientists were shaken, because this creature didn't follow the rules. Their skulls? Small. Brains? 1/3 the size of ours. No tools, no fire, no languages supposedly. But here's what shattered everything. They intentionally buried their dead. Wait, what? That kind of behavior? We'd only seen it in Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Creatures with big brains, abstract thinking, spiritual ideas. But Homo naledi had none of that on paper. So how did they know to bury? To hide their dead in deep sacred darkness? Think about it. This isn't some open field burial. They hauled corpses through jagged rock, pitch-black tunnels, and tight squeezes, over and over again. And they did it with deliberate care. Here's where it gets wilder. The bones? Just 236, 0 to 335, 0 years old. That's recent. Too recent. They were alive when Homo sapiens was already evolving, which means we weren't alone. Even then, as our ancestors shaped tools and kindled fire, a smaller, stranger species was performing rituals in the dark. And these weren't mindless creatures. Homo naledi had curved fingers like climbers, legs built for walking, feet like ours, but their shoulders and torsos, more primitive, closer to apes. They were a mosaic, a fusion of ancient and advanced, a paradox with a pulse. So, who were they? A failed experiment? A spiritual offshoot? A shadow species that whispered secrets to the dark? Or were they just another kind of human, living differently? Not lesser, not broken, just parallel. It forces a haunting thought. What if intelligence isn't just about brain size? What if meaning, ritual, and grief live deeper? In the marrow, in the instincts, in the soul? What if they were the ones who knew something we didn't? Because those burials, that wasn't survival. That was memory. That was a loss. That was love. And then they vanished. No war, no blaze, no epic fall. Just silence. And bones. And a riddle carved into the cave walls of time. We used to think humanity was a clean ascent, a golden staircase toward genius. But Naledi laughs at that. Because the truth is messier and far more beautiful. They may be gone, but in their story, we see ourselves. Not the smartest, not as the strongest, but as one version of human among many. Imagine stepping onto a tropical island. Dense jungle, ancient volcanoes, and whispers in the trees. Now picture this, a human skull, only about the size of a grapefruit. That's not science fiction. That's Homo floresiensis, the smallest humans ever discovered. And their story? It's one of the strangest in the entire human saga. The year was 2003. The island? Flores, in Indonesia. Archaeologists were exploring a limestone cave called Liang Bua. They were expecting maybe animal bones, some early human tools. Instead, they found a 3-foot-tall hominin, fully grown, bipedal. Antares the Twisnot a child. She was quickly nicknamed the Hobbit, and not just for her height. She had tiny limbs, a flat face, and a skull 1/3 the size of ours. Yet inside that skull, a brain that may have hunted, crafted tools, and even cooked food. She lived around 100 years ago, which means she existed at the same time as Homo sapiens. Think about that. While our ancestors were spreading across continents, building fire and language, these tiny humans were surviving in isolation on an island, frozen in time. Scientists were stunned. How could such a small human evolve so recently? Some said disease. Others claimed it was just a malformed modern human. But the more bones they found, the clearer it became. This was a distinct species, not a mutant, not a myth. A real human cousin, thriving in total isolation. So how did they get there? One theory: their ancestors, possibly Homo erectus, made it to Flores during a glacial period when sea levels were low. Once isolated, their bodies adapted. On small islands with limited resources, creatures often shrink over generations. It's called island dwarfism. It's happened to elephants, deer, even hippos. Why not humans? And here's the eerie part. Some local legends speak of tiny forest people, Ebugogo, hairy, small, fast, and clever. Coincidence? Or a memory passed down through generations? But then, silence. Like the Denisovans, the Naledis, and Neanderthals. They vanished. No signs of violence. No evidence of war. Just bones. And echoes. So what took them? Was it a volcanic eruption? A sudden climate shift? Or was it us? Did Homo sapiens arrive and push them out intentionally or not? We'll never know for sure. But one thing is certain. They were human. Not in the way we define it today, but in the way that matters most. They hunted. They built. They endured. And in their own way, they dreamed. Their story cracks the mirror we hold to ourselves. We are not the only version of intelligence. Not the only form of survival. Not the only way to be human. A cave on Luzon Island, Philippines. Diggers break through layers of rock and time. Thin bones, teeth, a foot, a few fingers. Not much to look at, but everything about them screamed one thing. This wasn't anyone we knew. They called it Homo luzonensis. Another mysterious human relative. Another species that shouldn't exist, yet did. And the deeper you look, the more it messes with everything we thought we knew. Luzon is remote. Even today, it's tough to get to. But tens of thousands of years ago, reaching it would have meant crossing the open ocean. No land bridges, no shortcuts. And yet, someone got there. Someone lived there. And they weren't Homo sapiens. Let's talk about those bones. The teeth? Small, more like a chimpanzee's. The fingers and toes? Curved, made for climbing, like tree dwellers. But here's the kicker. These traits weren't all from one era. They looked ancient, like 2-million-year-old hominins. But they lived just 0 to 67 years ago. Same time as Neanderthals. Same time as early sapiens. Same time as the hobbits on Flores. So who the hell were these people? It's like someone hit shuffle on evolution. Homo luzonensis was a mix of traits, some primitive, some advanced. They walked upright. Probably used tools. Possibly controlled fire. But we still don't know what their face looked like. We've got no skull, no full skeleton. Just clues. Just whispers. And yet, the message is loud. The human story wasn't linear. It was wild, twisting, chaotic. This wasn't a one-time glitch in the system. It's a pattern. Different humans, evolving separately, in isolation, all across the globe. Tiny islands, deep forests, frozen plains. They didn't just survive. They thrived in places we didn't even know they reached. And maybe that's the bigger reveal. Maybe we're the weird ones. Because while we were building culture and fire, others were quietly carving out their own existence. No empires, no monuments. Just life, just survival. Just humanity in another form. We always assumed we were the climax of evolution, the peak of intelligence, but every new discovery like Luzonensis whispers something else. You're not the only ones. There were others, wiser in ways we can't measure, built differently but not broken, just forgotten. Their bones are rare, their stories barely told, but they matter. Because with every species we uncover, the mirror cracks a little more. And the reflection looking back? It isn't just one face anymore. It's a chorus, a crowd, a reminder that we're not the humans. We're just the ones who made it. They were monsters once. At least, that's how we told it. Brutish, dumb, half-human thugs clubbing mammoths in icy caves. But the truth? Neanderthals weren't beasts. They were brilliant. And they ruled the Ice Age long before we showed up. Let's rewind. Europe, 400 years ago. A world locked in frost. Woolly mammoths thunder across frozen plains. Cave lions hunt in packs. And deep in the Valesa, a new kind of human rises. Shorter, stockier, stronger. Built for cold. Eyes sharp, bones dense, minds alert. Neanderthals. Not our ancestors, but our cousins. A parallel experiment in being human. They didn't just survive the Ice Age. They mastered it. They crafted tools from flint so precise, some rival early surgical instruments. They created clothing from animal hides, perfectly tailored to keep out in heat. They tamed fire and shaped spears. They lived in caves, but they weren't cave people. They had art, jewelry, burials, ritual. They mourned their dead, laid flowers over bodies, painted on cave walls with red ochre for a purpose. Not savage storytellers. And here's the shocker. You carry them inside you. If you're of European or Asian descent, about 1–2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. That heavy brow you see in some faces? That's them. That part of your immune system that fights off ancient viruses? That's them, too. They didn't vanish completely. They fused with us. But what happened to them? Why did they disappear, and we remain? It's still debated, but here's the twist. It wasn't war. There's no evidence of genocide or conquest. It was slower, stranger. Maybe we outbred them. Maybe climate shifts hit them harder. Maybe we just moved in, and over time, they faded. But in some places, they lasted longer than we thought. Some scientists believe the last Neanderthal walked the Earth only 20 years ago. That's yesterday on the cosmic clock. And that means the Ice Age didn't just end their story. It merged it with ours. We used to call them failures. But now we realize they were us, just a different version. If things had gone slightly differently, this might be a Neanderthal world. A Neanderthal internet. A Neanderthal you. They weren't primitive. They were parallel. And maybe that's the real story here. The forgotten humans weren't lost because they were lesser. They were lost because history doesn't care who's better. Only those who survive. And who gets to tell the tale? It started with a bone, a pinky, no longer than a coin, pulled from the dark silence of a Siberian cave. At first glance, insignificant, but inside that fragment was a ghost. For years, the Denisova Cave was just another archaeological site, hidden in the Altai Mountains of Russia, cloaked in snow and silence. Until 2010, that pinky bone was sequenced. And the results? No match. Not Homo sapiens. Not Neanderthal. Something else entirely. A forgotten branch of humanity, the Denisovans. We'd never seen their faces. No full skeletons. No cave paintings. No tools that screamed, "This was us." They were shadows in the data. Genetic ghosts haunting the human genome. But here's the kicker. They're inside us, too. If you're from Asia, the Pacific Islands, or indigenous Australia, you carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. They're not just ancient, they're personal. So, who were they? We're still stitching that puzzle together. But the clues are wild. They lived at extreme altitudes, mountains so high, most of us would suffocate. Yet their DNA gifted Tibetans the ability to survive in thin air. Their blood held secrets adapted for the skies. They were the high-altitude humans. Not only that they likely interbred with Neanderthals, and with us. More than once. It wasn't a family tree. It was a tangled forest. Species colliding, mingling, surviving. Think about it. One cave. 3 different humans. All walking through the same space. Thousands of years apart. Or maybe, side by side. Neanderthals. Denisovans. Us. Not strangers. Not enemies. Just variations of the same spark. So why don't we talk about them more? Because they didn't leave monuments. They didn't leave myths. But they left something far more intimate. Us. Their fingerprints are in our hearts, our lungs, our blood. Their legacy isn't written on cave walls. It's written in code. And here's the real mind-bender. Some of the genes they passed on, they're still active, influencing your immune system, your sleep patterns. Even though your body reacts to certain diseases, they didn't vanish. They integrated, and then dissolved into memory. We thought we were the only ones. We were never alone. We thought history was a straight road. It was always a maze. We thought that Pinky Bone was a dead end. It was the key to an entire people. They were barely 3 feet tall, carried stone tools, hunted dwarf elephants, and walked upright like us. But these weren't children. They weren't myths. They were Homo floresiensis, the real-life hobbits of human history. It began in 2003. Deep inside Liangbua Cave, on the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists dug past centuries of soil and story and hit something no one expected. A tiny skull. Not a child's, but fully grown. An adult human, the size of a toddler. The world laughed at first. A deformity, they said. A mistake, a fluke. But then came more bones. More skulls. More evidence. No, this wasn't a one-off. This was a species. A new kind of human. Flores was their world. A volcanic island cut off from the mainland. No large predators. No escape. And so, evolution did what it always does when cornered. It adapted. Over thousands of years, their bodies shrank. Brains got smaller. But they didn't lose their fire. Literally. They made tools. They used fire. They hunted. They thrived. Imagine a group of 3-foot-tall humans carving their way through dense jungles, standing shoulder to knee with the smallest elephants Earth has ever seen. Nature's forgotten experiment. But then, like so many others, they vanished. Why? Volcanic eruptions? Climate shifts? Or did something else arrive? Us? Because here's the twist. Homo sapiens showed up in the region not long after their disappearance. Coincidence? Maybe. But history is full of suspicious coincidences. What we do know is that once we arrived, they didn't last much longer. Still, their bones whisper. They tell us something wild. Big brains weren't everything. Homo floresiensis didn't need our size, our smarts, or our dominance to survive. They carved out their own path, on their own terms, on an island far from anyone else. In many ways, they were the ultimate outsiders. Yet they belonged completely to this strange human story. And what if? What if they're not entirely gone? Some locals speak of Abu Gogosmal, hairy people who lived in the mountains. Fast, clever, mysterious. Driven away by fire, not time. Stories passed down, generation to generation. Folklore, or fossil memory. Could one of our cousins still be hiding in the jungle shadows? The line between myth and history is thinner than we think. Sometimes, all it takes is a cave, a bone, and a team that dares to dig deeper. The hobbits were real, and they weren't the only ones. Because just across the sea, on another island, another human species was waiting. Smaller, stranger, and just as forgotten. Stick with us. High up in the jagged cliffs of northern Philippines, inside a limestone cave choked with silence, a few scattered bones waited. They weren't supposed to be there. No one thought a new kind of human could still be hiding in plain sight. Not in 2019, not on a tourist island. But then one tooth, then another, a foot bone, a finger, and suddenly the scientific world froze. This wasn't us. This wasn't Neanderthal. This wasn't even Homo floresiensis. This was something entirely different. Homo luzonensis, another forgotten cousin, tiny, tree-climbing, and completely unexpected. The cave was called Callao, and for over 60 years, it held a secret. Homo luzonensis had strange features, curved toe bones for gripping branches, small, teeth primitive, yet oddly advanced, and a height that barely reached your ribcage. They looked like something halfway between ape and human, yet they made tools, and they clearly thrived in an island jungle. This wasn't just a new species. This was a reminder. Evolution doesn't follow our rules. It doesn't care about categories or timelines. It creates, it experiments, and sometimes it forgets to leave a full record. We once thought the human story was simple. Africa, outward expansion, us. But now these islands shatter that idea. Homo luzonensis existed at the same time as Homo sapiens, possibly for tens of thousands of years. Which means we weren't alone, not even recently. So what happened? Just like the hobbits of Flores, they vanished. No bodies, no burials, just bone fragments in a cave and a question hanging in the air. What wiped them out? Did climate kill them? Were they too isolated to survive? Or did something else arrive on the island, walking upright, armed with fire, and carrying a name we now call our own? History won't say. But the pattern is familiar. Here's the haunting part. The more we dig into caves, the more humans we find. Not metaphorically, literally. New species, new branches on the family tree. And each time, the mirror cracks a little more. We used to think we were alone. Now, we're realizing we may have outlived everyone else. But survival isn't victory. It's just persistence. And every extinct cousin we uncover leaves behind a silent message. We were here too. So next time you hear wind rustling through a mountain jungle, or see a shadow shift just out of sight, ask yourself, are we really the only ones left? Or just the last ones who remember? Because the Philippines held one of our lost brothers, and there might be more waiting in the dark. If this gave you chills, there's more coming. We're diving deeper into darker caves, older bones, and truths that rewrite history. Hit subscribe, light the torch, and walk with us into the unknown. We never saw their faces. We never found a full skull. No paintings, no tools, no graves. And yet they live inside you. If you have ancestry from Asia, Oceania, or the Americas, there's a phantom species lurking in your DNA. Denisovans, our ghost cousins. It started in a Siberian cave. Denisova Cave Cold, dark, forgotten. A finger bone was pulled from the ice-packed sediment. Tiny, ancient, unimpressive, until they ran the DNA. What they found shook everything. Not Neanderthal, not a modern human, but something else. A completely separate species, one we'd never seen before. The Denisovans were real, and they weren't just some minor branch of the family tree. They were everywhere. From the icy altitudes of Tibet to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, possibly even to Australia, and they were thriving. In fact, they were better at surviving in some environments than we were. Here's the twist. We didn't just meet them. We mated with them. They left genetic fingerprints behind. In our bones, in our lungs, in our immune systems. Ever wonder how some people can breathe easily at extreme altitudes, like the Himalayas? That's Denisovan DNA. Not evolution from USA borrowed upgrade from them. But what did they look like? That's the mystery. We still don't fully know. No full skeleton. No face. No artist's rendering based on a clean fossil. Just fragments, finger bones, teeth, and a sliver of a skull. Denisovans are the shadow people of our past. All presence, no form. So what happened to them? They lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Smart enough to interbreed. Tough enough to live in extreme climates. Resilient enough to expand far and wide. And yet, they're gone. Vanished without a trace. No civilization. No burial mounds. No legends passed down. Just genes. Maybe we absorbed them. Maybe we outcompeted them. Or maybe, like so many others, they simply faded when the climate changed. Or when we arrived. Because wherever Homo sapiens show up, one thing tends to follow: extinction. Still, they're not truly gone. You can't kill what lives in your bloodstream, in your cells, in the altitude of your breath, the immunity of your body. Every time you survive sickness, or climb a mountain without gasping for air, a Denisovan whispers, "You're welcome." Here's the haunting beauty. They're invisible, and everywhere. The most human thing about them? They left no legacy except us. We are the memory keepers now. The only ones left to wonder, what did they dream of? What language did they speak? What stories did they tell beneath the stars? We may never know their faces, but they shaped ours. And the deeper we dig, the more we realize. The ghosts in our blood were never gone. They were just waiting to be found. 70 years ago, we nearly vanished. Not metaphorically, literally. The entire human species reduced to just a few thousand individuals. Maybe fewer than 1. 0. One bad drought. One violent eruption, one cruel twist of fate, and we could have been just another fossil footnote. So how did we survive when so many others didn't? It starts with fire, but not the kind that cooks food. This was a supervolcano, Mount Toba, Indonesia, one of the largest eruptions in Earth's history. It hurled ash across continents, blocked the sun, plunged the planet into a volcanic winter. Skies went dark. Crops failed before they could even be planted. Entire ecosystems collapsed. Now, imagine being a tribe of foragers shuttled together under smoke-choked skies, watching the world freeze. That's the kind of pressure that snaps species in half. And it did. Not just animal humans. Genetic evidence shows something strange. Around 70 years ago, the diversity in our DNA collapsed. Like a forest fire had ripped through our family tree, leaving just a few branches smoldering. Some scientists call it the genetic bottleneck, a moment in time where almost all human variation vanished. Think of it like this. You're holding a deck of cards with thousands of designs. Then one flood hits, and you're left with 10. Those 10 cards? They go on to shape every hand played from then on. That's us. Almost everything you see in the modern human genome, every skin tone, eye shape, metabolism, immune response, descended from just a handful of survivors. But here's the twist. Other humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, they didn't pass through that bottleneck. They stayed in their regions. They didn't get hit as hard. And yet, we're the ones who made it. Why? Some say it was our social bonds, our ability to communicate, to plan, to imagine futures together. Others say it was dumb luck, right place, right climate, right food source. But whatever the reason, we slipped through the crack. Barely. And that moment rewired our destiny. Everything that came after art, war, cities, the internet, traces back to that near extinction. It wasn't strength. It wasn't genius. It was resilience, a stubborn refusal to fade. And here's the gut punch. What if other humans hit their own bottlenecks too? What if we just didn't make it through together? They blinked out. We blinked in. So when people say, we were meant to rule, remember, we were almost erased. We are not inevitable. We are survivors of chance. And that makes every heartbeat a miracle. Every step we take, every story we tell, carries the weight of the ones who didn't make it. Their silence is not just history. It's a warning, a reminder. Being here isn't guaranteed. It never was. The moment wasn't loud. No fire. No battle. No clash of spears. It was a hand pressed against a cave wall. Red ochre. Blown pigment. A silent imprint of presence. I was here. That may be the most human sentence ever spoken. And it didn't need words. Long before cities, before gods or kings, before history had pages, we told stories with shadows and shapes. Somewhere around 40 years ago, a new spark ignited inside Homo sapiens. Not just survival, not just tools, symbol. We started painting animals we hunted, gods we imagined, visions we dreamed. Why? No one really knows. Maybe it was a ritual. Maybe it was a memory. Or maybe we simply needed to speak without sound. This wasn't just art. It was a revolution. Because symbol changes everything. When you paint a horse in a cave, you don't just see a horse anymore. You see what it means. Speed, spirit, survival, myth. You're no longer just reacting to life. You're shaping it. But here's the eerie part. We weren't the first to do this. Deep in the El Castillo cave in Spain, a red disc dated to at least 650 years ago, older than any known Homo sapiens art. Who painted it? Neanderthals. That's right. Our brutish cousins weren't just grunting in caves. They were making symbols. They were dreaming too. And it goes deeper. Beads made from pierced shells, feathers, ochre-stained burial sites. Evidence that many human species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, even Homo naledi, may have had some form of symbolic life. Which begs the question, what if art wasn't a Homo sapiens trait? What if dreaming in metaphor was just human? Think about it. What separates us from animals isn't just intelligence. It's the ability to imagine what isn't there, to carve gods into stone, to paint death before it comes, to tell stories that stretch into eternity. Symbol gave us prophecy, memory, ritual, culture, language, and eventually, power. Because when you control the story, you control the future. But it started quietly, in the dark, with a handprint on a wall, a message sent 40 years into the future, to someone with a flashlight and goosebumps, a whisper across time, "Don't forget me," and we won't. Because those cave walls, they're not just art galleries, they're cathedrals of memory. They prove we were more than animals. We were dreamers, poets before pens. So next time you see a painting, a tattoo, a logo, a meme, remember, you're carrying an ancient fire, a spark that began when a forgotten human painted a story in blood and dust. We didn't just evolve. We imagined our way into existence. Close your eyes. Now, imagine waking up in a world where no one understands your words. Your jokes fall flat. Your stories go unheard. Your name vanishes in the wind. That's what happened not to one person, but to an entire species. Homo erectus, Homo naledi, Denisovans, Neanderthals. They may have spoken. They may have sung lullabies to their children, told myths by firelight, argued, grieved, laughed. But not a single sentence survived. Not one. Language is the ultimate ghost. It doesn't fossilize. It doesn't cling to bone. It dies in the air the moment it's spoken unless someone remembers. And nobody remembered theirs. Let that sink in. There could have been entire grammars, dialects, slang, poetry, all gone without a trace. You speak over 100 years of silence every time you open your mouth. Because the languages we lost weren't just systems, they were worlds. And it's not just extinct humans. Even among Homo sapiens, thousands of languages have died. Every 2 weeks, a language goes extinct. And with it jokes that will never be told again, recipes never passed down, stories never heard. But those ancient cousins, they didn't even get a dictionary. Still, there are clues. Neanderthals had the hyoid bone key to vocal speech. They had complex tools, social groups, and buried their dead. That's not the behavior of beasts. That's conversation. So, maybe they talked, or sang, or screamed, and yet we never heard them. Their voices were drowned by time. Like a radio frequency we forgot how to tune into. And now, here we are talking non-stop, filling the internet with words, surrounded by language, but somehow still haunted by the silence of those who came before. Think about it. What did Neanderthal lullabies sound like? What were Denisovan jokes like? Did Homo naledi have a name for the stars? We'll never know, but it doesn't mean they didn't exist. And here's the real twist. Maybe they whisper in us still, the way your breath catches when you're overwhelmed, the way your voice softens when you say goodbye. Instincts shaped by millennia of speech before language had rules. Maybe their lost voices carved the way for ours to rise. We call ourselves the storytellers. But we were never the first. We just happened to be the last ones left speaking. So next time you say anything, pause. You are continuing a conversation that began before history, before writing, before memory. You carry the silence of others every time you speak. Their words may be gone, but their desire to speak, that still burns. Like embers beneath our syllables. Picture this: a cold cave floor, a body laid to rest, hands folded, a flower tucked gently beside the head. A moment of silence. No monuments, no tombstones, just a pause. As if someone believed this wasn't truly goodbye. It wasn't survival. It wasn't food. It wasn't fire. It was something else. Something deeper. Something sacred. The beginning of belief. Long before cathedrals scraped the sky. Before pyramids rose from the sand. Before priests, gods, or afterlives had names. There were burials. And with them came a terrifying, beautiful idea. Maybe death wasn't the end. Neanderthals did it. Graves with grave good stools, bones, flowers. They didn't just toss bodies aside. They buried them with care. Homo naledi did it too. Deep in the rising star cave system, far from sunlight, they laid their dead to rest. Deliberately, repeatedly. No accident, no animals. A ritual. And ritual means belief. Think about that. These weren't just smarter apes. These were beings who paused, grieved, and imagined a world beyond this one. That's not animal instinct. That's spirituality. They may not have had gods, or religion, or prayers carved in stone, but they had something ancient, something universal. Mourning, that ache you feel when someone's gone, they felt it too. Tens of thousands of years ago. Maybe they whispered names into the dark. Maybe they sang to the bones. Maybe they waited for a soul to return. We don't know what they believed. But we know they believed something, and that's the haunting part. Because once belief enters the picture, we're not just talking about biology anymore. We're talking about meaning. Why did they care what happened after death? Why decorate graves? Why bury tools with someone who'll never use them again? Simple. They hoped. They feared. They wondered. Just like us. You see, belief doesn't come from science. It comes from pain, from love, from the unanswerable. They had it. Before us, without temples or doctrine. They felt the first sparks of something holy, and they passed that spark to us. When you light a candle for someone you lost, when you whisper a prayer, or stare at the stars and feel that ache, that's not modern. That's ancient. That's the shared breath of forgotten cousins, who cried over graves in the dark. They may not have written scripture, but they wrote something even deeper. The human soul exists, not in books, not in rituals, but in the way we remember, the way we mourn, and the way we hold on, long after the body is gone. It starts with darkness, not metaphorical, literal. A world with no cities, no power, no safety net. Only predators, cold, and night that feels like it'll swallow you whole. And then, a spark, a crackle, a flicker, fire. The first defiance, the first light. Long before we built empires, Before we shaped metal, charted maps, or wrote our names in stone, we learned to control fire. Do not just use it. Master it. Carry it. Protect it. Pass it from hand to hand, like a sacred treasure. Because fire wasn't just warmth, it was power. Homo erectus may have been the first. Nearly 1.5 million years ago, deep in the past, they weren't huddling in fear. They were gathering around the flame. Imagine the moment. The first sparks catch. Flame dances on dry leaves. The cold retreats. And suddenly, they're not prey anymore. There's something more. Because fire changed everything. It softened food, reshaping jaws, freeing energy for brain growth. It extended day into night, making room for stories, rituals, and connection. It warded off predators, turning them from the hunted into the hunters. But most of all, it created community. Picture it. Small groups, faces glowing orange. Smoke curling upward in silence. Meat roasting. Children are asleep by the warmth. And in between, stories. Not in words, maybe, but in gestures. Grunts. Songs. The first sparks of culture. You see, fire didn't just cook food. It cooked civilization. It taught us patience. It taught us to wait, to gather, to share. It gave us the rhythm of night and day. The hearth became the heart of the tribe. Every great human invention, agriculture, writing, cities, all of it built on the backs of those first flames. Because if you can't survive the night, you don't make it to the morning of invention. And here's the twist most forget. We weren't the only ones. Neanderthals mastered fire. So did Denisovans. Even Homo naledi may have used it to light their dead into the underworld. It wasn't our discovery. It was theirs too. So when we talk about human achievement, we have to stop pretending we lit the first match. We didn't. We inherited the flame. Every time you strike a lighter, sit by a campfire, watch a candle burn, you're reaching back through time to those huddled figures, sheltering that fragile light like it was the only thing keeping the dark at bay. Because it was. Fire didn't just give us light. It gave us time. Time to grow. Time to bond. Time to imagine. And those early humans, they gave us that time. Imagine being born into a world of ice. Not just snowflakes and chilly winds, but glaciers as tall as mountains. Oceans frozen into silence. A world where survival wasn't hard. It was nearly impossible. And yet, humans lived there, grew up there. They laughed, cried, hunted, dreamed, beneath skies that barely warmed. They were the children of the Ice Age. And most of them, we forgot. Let's rewind the clock. 40 years ago, Europe and Northern Asia were locked in frost. Woolly mammoths roamed. Saber-toothed cats prowled the forests. And in the midst of that frozen chaos, small bands of humans carved out a life. But not just us. Neanderthals still walked. Denisovans thrived in the east. And maybe, just maybe, other human cousins we haven't even found yet. Here's the wild truth. We weren't alone in the cold. Multiple human species shared this icy world, and some of them we barely know. There are traces. A fossil here, a jawbone there, a child's tooth in a Siberian cave. Silent, ancient, unfinished stories frozen in time. One of the most haunting, the Denny discovery. A girl half Neanderthal, half Denisovan. Two different species. One child. Proof that these humans didn't just fight. They loved. They lived together. They shared. They made families. And then, They vanished. No wars, no great collapse, just disappearance. The climate shifted. The ice crept forward. Resources thinned. And slowly, they faded from the earth. Not because they were weak, not because we were better, but because sometimes the world changes faster than we can. Now, here's the twist. Their DNA, still inside us. Many people today carry bits of Neanderthal code. Some have Denisovan blood woven into their genes. Their legacy isn't in history books. It's in our lungs, bones, and immune systems. They still walk with us, even if we don't see them. But what about the others? The ones we haven't found, the ones that left no name, no art, no trace? Could entire species of humans have come and gone, and we never knew? Scientists think yes. In fact, genetic evidence suggests we carry whispers from unknown ancestors, mysterious lines of DNA that don't match any species we've discovered. Ghosts, genetic shadows. Forgotten humans are buried beneath the ice. So the next time you feel the cold on your skin, think of them. The hunters who tracked prey through the snow, the mothers who wrapped their babies in furs, the fathers who lit fires in frozen caves, and the children, born into frost, raised on courage, lost to time, because their story isn't gone. It's just sleeping beneath the ice, waiting for us to dig, to remember, to feel. Beneath our feet, the past is buried. Not in books, not in stories, but in bones, cracked, weathered, stone-dry echoes of lives lived thousands, sometimes millions of years ago. And if you listen closely, they whisper, not in words, but in shape, structure, and scars. Because fossils don't lie, they remember. The right skull can flip history on its head. A single finger bone can challenge everything we thought we knew. One ancient tooth, enough to rewrite entire timelines. That's the power of fossils. They aren't just relics. They're receipts. Proof that someone was here, that they walked, hunted, laughed, and died. And in death, they left us clues. Clues we're still learning how to read. Take Homo naledi, discovered deep in the dark chambers of a South African cave. Bones twisted through tight tunnels no animal should crawl into. And yet there they were. Hundreds of them. Adults, children, an entire community, hidden in the shadows. But here's the eerie part. These weren't burials caused by nature. They were placed there, deliberately, carefully, like a ritual. And yet Homo naledi had small brains, primitive features. They weren't supposed to be smart enough for that, but their bones said otherwise. That's the thing about fossils. They challenge our arrogance. We love to believe we're the apex, the final form, the smartest, most advanced. But bones say, you weren't the first. You weren't the only. And maybe you're not even the most remarkable. Consider Denisova Cave, a place that's rewriting everything. Inside that one site, Neanderthal bones, Denisovan bones, fossils from hybrid children, and genetic traces of even older unnamed ancestors. 3 species, 1 location, all coexisting, overlapping, interbreeding, a melting pot of vanished humanity hidden in a remote Siberian cave. And yet, we almost missed it. A pinky bone the size of a tic-tac ignored for years turned out to belong to a whole new species. Just think about that. A world-changing discovery nearly tossed aside. That's how fragile our understanding is. How thin the veil between known and lost truly is. But fossils don't scream. They wait. In deserts, caves, mountaintops, under the ocean floor, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to dig. And when we do, they don't just tell us what these forgotten humans look like. They show us what it means to be human. Because in the curve of a spine, in the wear on a tooth, in the cradle of a child's skull, we find echoes of ourselves. You've never met them. You've never heard their names. They left no books, no photos, no graves you'd recognize. And yet, they live inside you, right now, right beneath your skin. Not in some mystical way, but in your blood, in your cells, in the blueprint that makes you, you. This isn't poetry. It's genetics. Modern science cracked open the human genome and found something unexpected. We are haunted, not by spirits, but by strands of ancient DNA, fragments from humans we forgot. Neanderthals were first. At first, we thought they were long gone. A side note in evolution. Cavemen who died out while we marched forward. But then the truth hit like a thunderclap. Every non-African person on Earth carries 1% to 2% Neanderthal DNA. That's not just trivia. That's personal. Your skin tone, your immune system, even though you react to certain medications, it could all be shaped by an ancestor who died 40 years ago. Then came the Denisovans. No skeletons, no faces, just a single finger bone and a few teeth. But inside that tiny fragment, an entire species came roaring back. And here's the kicker. If you're from Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, or parts of Southeast Asia, you could carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's higher than anyone expected. We didn't just know these people. We loved them, lived with them, had children with them. And those children, we are still here. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Because not all the DNA in us matches anything we've discovered. Some pieces, they don't belong to Neanderthals, or Denisovans, or Homo sapiens. They belong to someone else, an unknown species, a ghost lineage. We don't have their bones. We don't know their face. We only know this. They existed. They touched our ancestors. Their code became part of ours. And yet, we forgot them. Imagine it. You're walking around today, with ancient genes guiding how you respond to altitude, how your brain is wired, how your body fights disease. And those genes, a gift from someone who vanished before the first pyramid rose. This changes everything. The idea of pure human, gone. The story of one lone, rising species? Myth. What we are is a mixture, a chorus, a genetic symphony written by lovers and fighters who lived in caves, jungles, and ice. You are not just you. You are them, too. For over 2 million years, the Earth was not ours alone. We shared it with fire bearers and tool makers, with Ice Age survivors and jungle dwellers, with humans that looked like us, and others that didn't. Some had brow ridges, like cliffs. Others stood small, barely reaching your waist. Some lived in caves, others under forest canopies. But all of them were human. And all of them are gone. We weren't the first. We weren't the smartest. We were just the ones who survived. But survival doesn't make you chosen. It makes you lucky. And with that luck comes a responsibility. Because when they vanished, so did ideas. So did languages. So did songs never sung again. Entire worldviews died out with them. And we hardly noticed. But now, science is catching up. Archaeologists, geneticists, and dreamers are digging deeper than ever. They're finding teeth in caves that shouldn't exist, skulls with no matching species, DNA that doesn't belong to anyone we know. Every discovery adds another face to the human story. And it turns out, the story isn't linear. It's tangled, messy, beautiful. It wasn't just about us rising. It was after many tries, many surviving, and eventually, most fading. But fading isn't the same as disappearing, because their stories still whisper from the soil. Their DNA still hums inside our bones. And their courage? It laid the path we now walk. You're not just a product of your time. You're a time capsule of every human who came before. You are the echo of lost mothers, the dream of forgotten fathers. You are made of extinct prayers, of ancient fire, of blood that has traveled through every extinction and still survived. You carry them, their joy, their pain, their fight. Every breath you take is a monument to a species that didn't make it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the purpose of memory. Not just to honor what was, but to remind us what it means to be human. Not just flesh and logic, but story and struggle, connection and loss. So now, we stand at the edge of history's shadow, not as its rulers, but as its witnesses. The forgotten humans aren't gone. They're inside you. They shaped you. They whisper through your instincts, your heartbeat, your dreams. We are the last breath of an ancient world still echoing through time. And as we look forward towards stars, machines, and new worlds, let's never forget the worlds that built us. Because in remembering them, we remember ourselves. Subscribe to us, because here, the forgotten rise again. And the human story? It's just getting started.